So we've covered the context of doing a systematic review, why it's important to do one, and then we've just started off with the main crux of the session, which is how to do a systematic review. So now we'll continue after we've looked at how to assemble a meaningful and specific yet answerable research question. We'll now look at the actual search methodology and how to carry that out. So we've completed number one, to identify an answerable question. The next thing we need to do is to set the inclusion and exclusion criteria. So this can be a bit of a task, so let's get started. So to do this, the legwork that you have to do, I thought it best if I just give you a demonstration of how I would do it. And if you can model your efforts on what I do, then you should do pretty well. So it's in the, as I said before, it's in the ideas phase at the moment. So it's going to be the research question is going to be something along the lines of depression and objectively measured physical activity. So what are the physical activity levels of people with depression, but only looking at studies that have objectively measured physical activity. The reason for that is because from around 2010, there was a big move in the literature to move away from the use of physical activity questionnaires, which are subjective and have to be the questions have to be interpreted, which opens the questionnaire up to all sorts of biases, in favour of the use of body-worn activity monitors, which today, in 2020, 2021, we've got technology, wrist-worn activity monitors that are small, lightweight, and you've got commercial versions that you can buy that are pretty inexpensive as well. So we should always try to endeavour in research to use objective measurement methods of physical activity. So the activity monitor is just that. So when you've got your research question, the next stage is to extract themes from the title. Okay, so different themes or concepts. If we just look at the title, we can see an obvious concept is depression, and then another key concept would be the fact that we want studies that have used a certain measurement method, so it's objectively measured. And what are we measuring? Physical activity. So we've got three key concepts there. So number 1, 2, and 3: depression, physical activity, and the mode of monitoring. So what you want to do is, and I just usually do this in a Word document and save it, so I can go back to it if it needs to be replicated in the future. Just for each concept, think of as many keywords as possible that could be related to that concept. So for depression, I happen to know that there are a few keywords in the literature apart from depression that are used in its place. It kind of stands alone. Somebody can display depressive symptoms. They might have mild or moderate to severe depression, but either way, the keyword depression is going to appear in that study. Now, with physical activity, an obvious synonym for physical activity is exercise. So we want to look for both keywords there. Now, where an activity monitor is used, obviously in many studies Sometimes they call them activity monitors, but more often, because the sensor inside an activity monitor is an accelerometer. So an accelerometer is a tiny, tiny sensor. You've got one in your smartphone. It's the sensor that if you lie on your side and your smartphone flips the screen round so you can still see it, that's the accelerometer that's detecting that change in angle. So a really good sensor for measuring any changes in movement and also any changes in posture that might occur during sleep as somebody moves from side to side and so on. Accelerometers are so common that the term accelerometry is often used in the literature to describe the use of accelerometers to measure physical activity. So from that concept, number 3, we've got 3 keywords that we would look at. So we identify the concepts, which you've done there. We list the keywords, so we've got those. And then we would go to our search engine and we want to add the keywords, but we want to link them in some way. And if you want to search at that point, you probably get quite a few studies. The next step is to limit the type of study that you're interested in, or rather, sorry, number 4, I've got the next thing I tend to do is limit by publication date. Now, again, another question is quite a lot of students have asked me, how far should I go back? Well, my advice is not to use an arbitrary number, because let's say I was second marking your poster and I was to say, okay, why did you use a cutoff of 10 years? If you were to say, if the reason is my supervisor told me, then you're going to struggle to answer that question because that's not a good enough answer. So what I tend to tell students to do is to find a systematic review that's most similar to theirs, okay, and only go back as far as that one. So the last systematic review might have been published in 2013 or 2016 or even 2018. And so that would be your cutoff in terms of publication date. And then you obviously want to be specific in terms of which studies you use. So we're going to incorporate all of this, all of these 5 steps, looking at depression and objectively measured physical activity. So let's go ahead and do it. So we go to PubMed, or that's where I've chosen to go to first. Now let's do something that you shouldn't do, but let's do it anyway, and I'll show you how PubMed works, or how any search engine rather, how it works, because they all work on a very similar algorithm. So let's just put in depression. Depression, accelerometer, physical activity, and let's just search. So we've only got a few keywords in there. Now we've got 64 results. And if we scroll down, then I need to reset all of these. So we'll just reset all filters because this is from when I was preparing for the session. Okay, so what we've got there is a few more papers. And you'll notice that we've got now, this is just as if we put the search terms in and just press search. And you'll notice that we've got a load of studies that they're not relevant. So we're not interested in, for our systematic review, people with schizophrenia who have depression. We don't want to look at any pilot studies or feasibility. So a lot of studies that are not relevant. So why is that? If we go to advanced search, we can scroll down and we can see what, we click on this arrow, it tells you what PubMed has done. So it's tried to help. So because we've just put in the search terms, what most search engines do is they take each term and just read from left to right. And so what it's done is it's found all papers on depression, and then all papers with the term accelerometer, and then all papers with the term physical, and then all papers with the term activity in. And that's why searching in that manner, you typically end up with a lot of papers. I've only used a few search terms there, but if we'd had more, we would have ended up, somewhere in the thousands. So what do we need to do? Well, common thing is just to search the title and abstract. So we can put depression in, and if we add what you'll know as a Boolean operator, we want to connect the search terms with and. So the next one, so let's say now what we can do, if we've got a term and it has lots of, so if we could look for accelerometer, we can look for accelerometry, and if there were any other kind of derivatives of that term, then if we just what you call truncate the term here using the asterisk, then we can add that. So far we want all studies with the term depression and studies which contain depression and the term accelerometer or accelerometry in the title or abstract. And now we can put physical activity. Now, if we've got a search term which is made of 2 or more words, then always make sure we put it in double quotations in that manner, and it'll treat it as one search term. So that's a really important thing to remember. So we know that studies will either, or authors rather, will either use the term physical activity or they'll use the term exercise. So I'll just tell the search engine to find studies that have looked at physical activity or looked at exercise. So it'll really depend on the journal. Instructions to the author as to whether physical activity or the term exercise being used. So let's search for that and see what we come up with. Okay, so lots of results there. So far too many results so far. So do what I mentioned before. So I happen to know that the last review that was published on this area was published in 2016. Okay, so we don't want to go all the way back to the 1800s, certainly not. So 2016 there. So that's the literature that we want to search, and that should see the number come down nicely. Now, I know that what I'm interested in are almost exclusively observational studies. Okay, so the studies in this review would be almost exclusively those which are kind of cross-sectional in nature and just took a sample of people with depression and measured their physical activity levels. So there we've got, 1,000 results, and we could go on to uh, narrow down by, using the article types and so on. But we'll go with that for now. And we could narrow it down by, refining the search terms and so on. But in the interest of time, because, this is just a demo, we can export those findings. So we want the abstract. And if you create a file just using the save option, then that'll appear here. And it'll feature all of the studies that you've got there. So what I tend to do is just cut and paste those findings into a Word document. And because I'm going to be, the next stage is to hand sort through those studies. So it's going to be a lengthy job. So I do spend a little bit of time just putting this into a nice font that I can read, single spacing, because the next stage is to hand sort. So let's just do a few sex-related associations among anemia, body mass index and kidney function, cross-sectional. So not interested in people with anemia. So straight away we can get rid of that one. This one in the BMJ, open diabetes. So weight gain, people with diabetes, okay, not interested in that one because in this systematic review, part of the going from the title, from PCOS, the inclusion criteria is otherwise healthy adults, so aged over 18, and I want studies that have not looked at just males or females, so both, and otherwise healthy individuals, so people with a diagnosis of depression. So that will narrow things down nicely, and probably end up resulting in me getting rid of a lot of these. So this is children. Okay, so let's get rid of that one. So there'll be lots. So you could probably actually, due to the time, current times that we're in, is if I head back over to here, go to advanced search, probably a decent thing to do would be to copy a search there, pop it in the search box. So poppy search in the search box, and because at the moment there's lots of studies that included COVID, then doing that will exclude a nice number of studies there. And then it's given me a load of options to, be more specific about, is it COVID-19, SARS, and yeah, all of this. So I'd spend some time going through that process, because that'll help you, rather than kind of hand sorting through all the studies um, that have recently been published on COVID, because chances are you might well be doing something on COVID. If so, then leave that in your search terms, obviously. So, just as a reminder, you need to you carefully use Boolean operators. The way that I describe them is, you could say that they're also known as, you saying to the search engine, could you please, and then whatever you're asking it to do. So remember that when you've got a term that has more than one word, you need to put double quotations around it. And then you can use truncation for any terms that have the same kind of, not, it wouldn't be classed as a suffix, but the same beginning to the word. And the main Boolean operators would be and, which is basically saying to the search engine, could you please find all of these terms? So for me, it was kind of depression, accelerometer, and physical activity were the main terms anyway. You might use or, in which case you're asking the search engine to please find articles with just one or the other of these topics, please. And remember to use clever use of parentheses, just in the same way that you use parentheses when you are typing out an equation in Excel or in a scientific calculator, if you ever used one of those. And a third is to exclude articles, which is, I wasn't interested in COVID in my systematic review, so I'd exclude that. A good example there. Take care that you don't overzealous use of the operator not can exclude too many studies, so just bear that in mind. And then the results, once you've hand sorted through them, you need to just record the numbers of each stage. So you can download this from Canvas. It's just a Word document. Fill it in, cut and paste it into your work, and there you've got your Prisma flowchart. And you just record the numbers at each stage. So you've done your database search, and you record your numbers for your database search here. Any other sources that have been recorded? This is from what we call the grey literature, anything not published in journal articles. So from Google Scholar, could be government white papers, or things that are important to include but not published in journal articles, and found through more traditional databases such as Medline, etc. And then you need to remove duplicates and list the number of duplicates removed there. Normally, that gives you a nice, satisfying reduction in number. This is easiest done using a citation manager such as EndNote. You can download that through the university. Otherwise, you would have to pay for it. Good program though. Or Mendeley is an open source citation manager software. And then after that, the process of screening articles, manually screen all your articles, so you just hand sort through them. That's why systematic reviews that are kind of full scale, like the one that I showed you, they're normally done by 2 or more researchers. And then once you've done that hand screening, just enter the number that have been included and enter the number that have been excluded. So you're at the screening stage here. And then after that, you're looking you would look back over what's been included and just look for within the full text articles. Do try and obtain all of the full text articles. It's only at this stage that you need to access them. So again, a minority of students have mentioned that they're trying to access all of the full text articles at this early stage up here. Don't do that. You will just run out of time. Yeah, just use the title and the abstract. That's fine up until you get to this point. So when you're at this point, you probably just have kind of 10 to 30 articles, and you can get the full text through interlibrary loans if the authors haven't paid the fee. It's normally about £2 to have your article as an open access to everyone. And then you need to include the final number of studies that have been included right at the bottom here on your Prisma diagram. So easy when you've been shown how to do it. Just takes some time, a lot of effort, but it can be done. So it's good practice to decide upon your search criteria, do it really carefully before you do the actual real search. Try and avoid searching and then kind of making little changes here and there before, as you go through the search process. That's not good practice. All of your search criteria should be decided. A priori is Latin and just means prior to. So your search criteria should be decided prior to actually doing the search. It's not good scientific practice to, tweak things as we go along so that we find something more along the lines of what we want to. That's not what science is about. So use at least 2 databases. And again, the really good paper that I showed you at the outset of the session shows that just by combining 3 big databases, Medline, Embase, I think you have free access to through the university, and certainly the Cochrane database or Cochrane collaboration is a really excellent resource. You got up to about 97% of all relevant material. And just to hammer home the same message, and this is why we spend so much time going through getting the search right, is that remember what I said before, the systematic review is only as good as the studies it contains. We've identified an answerable question, we've set the inclusion and exclusion criteria, and the search methodology. And the next part is just to look at data extraction and the reporting of the results, and then how you summarize findings. So the data extraction part is once you've hand sorted through your the results of your search, then you will build a table, which you'll have read a few systematic reviews by now, and you'll notice that everyone has a table which has information in like this. The table looks, it'll look something like this when it's kind of published. the author, population characteristics, when it was published, or data collection period we've got here. Yeah, and different characteristics depends on the study design that the review was interested in. But all of this information, I just, as do many of my colleagues, just pop into an Excel spreadsheet. And so here, this is just as mentioned, the review before into depression, physical activity. Just got some of the studies that have been published recently, Howie, Gaskin, Hollands. Got the sample size, participant characteristics. They all had a diagnosis of moderate to severe depression. Spot the typo. The assessment tool used, so mainly Beck's Depression Inventory, so it's a really popular measurement tool. Go to your GP, mention that you've got low mood or something like that, it might give you that questionnaire to fill out. The measurement instrument, so remember I mentioned it's normally a wrist-worn activity monitor, but there are different types. So there's things like the Actigraph, that's an American model, the Jenny Active, which is produced by a British company. And then how physical activity was expressed. So MVPA stands for moderate to vigorous physical activity. That's the type which, it's the intensity of physical activity which gives the greatest health benefits. And that's the case for most studies. This study's used steps, so hard to compare when you're trying to do, a comparison across studies. And here you can see a summary of the study findings, and obviously they need to be padded out to include a little more detail. But yeah, so that's what data extraction. You'd enter that into a table and just pop it into your systematic review. So when you're reporting your results, you describe the Prisma in a flow diagram, summarize the study characteristics, and in your results section, the same rule applies as does with all scientific articles. You just describe what the image shows. And so you just comment on any trends, patterns, summarize what you've found, or describe what you found, and then it's in the discussion where you compare and contrast and do what you are used to. So just about at the end. So notice that it's the search methodology and carrying out the search itself. That's what's really time consuming. Once you've got your results, then reporting them and then summarize. The discussion section is straightforward. It's like any other discussion. It's slightly shorter. It's slightly more condensed than you're used to. And when you're writing it, think about this. Just always think, if a reader were to remember one thing about this review, what would it be? So always have a main message that you want the reader to take away with them. That could be that there's a strong consensus in the literature and this is what it is. Alternatively, it could be that the literature is really split in terms of what the main findings are, and there are many findings. Here's what they are, and this is what my kind of interpretation is. But any discussion, and if I've taught you before in this kind of context on this thing, you'll know that I've recommended that every discussion is the same. Starts off the study aimed to, say what the study aimed to do, and then say the main findings were, and then say what the main findings were. And then depending on how many main findings you found, discuss each finding in turn, each one taking up roughly one paragraph. It depends on what you've found, of course. And then at the end of the discussion, the strengths and limitations of the study. Because in English we read from top to bottom, remember, then get the negative stuff out of the way first. So this study did have some limitations, and say what they were, state clearly what they were, and then go to the strengths and finish strong. And it's at this point, before you write the conclusion, I always advise students to go away, do something, detach, relax, because you've only got a few more sentences to write, and then come back with a fresh mind, and then write a short, smooth, nicely flowing conclusion. And try and leave the reader, so this will be your dissertation supervisor, and second marked by someone else. So if it's anything, if it's physiology related or measurement related, or it could well be me. Always try and leave the reader feeling that they've enjoyed reading your thesis. So imagine your supervisor with that cup of coffee there, and they come to the end of your thesis and they close down the file. If they can look back and think, that was pretty good, that was interesting, then there, you're on to a winner, as they say. Now, on your travels, I mentioned that you'll come across a systematic review and meta-analysis at undergraduate level. Don't even worry about what one of these is, what they are. Don't even worry about what they are. But you'll see something like this in the back. That's the additional part. I mentioned that this is called a forest plot. You can see the studies in the review included on the side there. Obviously, this is just an example. There'll be more than 3. So the forest plot is just a numerical, statistical way of showing the effect size of an intervention, typically. But yeah, in terms of understanding anything further than that, then yeah, don't worry about that, and certainly do not attempt to do one. So guidance on a systematic review in terms of why we do one in this session, and then we focus mainly on how to do systematic review, so essential resources for preparing one, give you a demo of how to start one and do the search, and then after that you're kind of home free. And then task for next week. Next week's session is statistics without the tears, or statistics without the stress. Yeah, statistics without the stress, I titled it. Everybody likes a bit of alliteration there. So next week, if you could read and do a little task on Canvas about study designs. So obviously you've looked at study designs before. I'm not going to drill down into the detail of each one and why we do them, but give you an overall view of how to spot certain study designs, which will allow you to quickly include them or exclude them, whether if you're doing a review or another type of study for your dissertation. If you can quickly identify a study and by its design recognize that, that's not worth me reading, then it's a more effective use of your time. So how to do a systematic review, the preparation of one, carrying one out. Week 4, the dissertation module,